Hi, my name is Terrence Roberts. I am a former student here at SIU. Came here in 1972 as a student in psychology and also at that same time as a professor in the undergraduate program of social work. But let's go back a little bit in time. Before SIU, before I came here, I didn't even know there was such a place as Southern Illinois University. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas in the year 1941. And those of you who know your history, especially American history, will realize that that was not the most propitious time for a person like me, Terry Roberts, to have been born in a place like Little Rock, Arkansas. Little Rock, along with a lot of other the southern deities, if you will, states that is, that make up the South, were all in league supporting this notion of legal segregation. In fact, in 1896, the Supreme Court issued a warning, another warning, pardon me, a doctrine, I'll call it a doctrine, of legal separation in 1896, Plessy v. Ferguson decision. That law codified all the stuff that had been going on for centuries before, put it into law so that it wouldn't be mistaken for anything else. And that affected me in 1941 as a kid who was being born in Little Rock. As a black kid, I had no rights, none whatsoever. So I had to fight my way through the system and eventually wound up as one of the Little Rock Nine, that group of kids you may have read about who were integrating Central High School as a consequence of the new law, which had been issued by the Supreme Court in 1954, the Brown decision. The Brown decision challenged the Plessy decision, said no, it was constitutional, you say, under Plessy, but it is now non-constitutional to do that. Now that question looms for me, how can it be something is constitutional at one point, and then at another point it is unconstitutional? I can't make sense out of that. And I'm hoping some of you will become legal scholars or perhaps historians or philosophers or whoever you have to be to figure that one out. I just add that as a challenge to you listeners. But in any case, that all happened. But during all of that, I was a very serious student. I wanted to learn. I needed to learn. My mom told me that learning was most important. My first grade teacher said that we kids had to become executives in charge of our learning. All this input, with community people saying, boy, get your education. And as ungrammatical as I was, I still saw that as part of the general message. Terry Roberts, you need to learn who you are, who others are, what you're here for, what you need to do, et cetera, et cetera. So that led me to complete my undergraduate work, and I took a master's degree from UCLA School of Social Work. And then a few years later, I get a phone call from one of my former UCLA professors, who's now at this place called Southern Illinois University. My first hearing of it. Now, Jerry Auerbach was his name, and he said, Terry, I need you on the faculty. I said, really? A light came on. See, because I'm so interested in learning, I thought, if I go to SIU, I can enroll in a further program, a doctoral program. I broached that to Jerry. He said, let's talk to the dean. The three of us talked. The dean agreed. So I became officially Terry Roberts, the instructor/student. So I spent 3 years in Carbondale, 1972 to 1975. And upon graduation, I left here and went back to California. You know, I often have opportunity to speak to large groupings of students at all levels, from kindergarten through third grade, all the way up through graduate school and beyond. And I always accept that as an opportunity to encourage people to continue learning. And if they're not already involved in learning, to start learning. Learning is the key to all of this. Learning is the key to learning who you are, who others are, and how you might resolve issues that arise around you. Often people will come to me, especially young people, first-year college students particularly, will say, we want to protest, we want to do banners, we want to do posters. And I said, and what will you say on them? What is it you've learned that will allow you to write things that are meaningful and forceful and useful? I think before you go out on the streets and protest, you need to learn the history of the country. You need to learn the history of some of these philosophies. You need to learn how these things came to be in the first place. Then you will find the point at which you need to attack. You'll find the point at which you will need to shed light. You'll find the point at which other people will readily join you because they understand what you're talking about. So don't go there ill-prepared just to have a few slogans and a few posters and banners, but to go there fully armed with knowledge. It's sort of like what you find in the scriptures. If you read that, put on the full armor of learning and then be prepared for the arrows that come back in opposition to you, because you surely will be opposed by those who want to maintain the status quo. Don't get tripped up by being too early or too late. And I urge all of you to think about your own life in terms of what it's going to look like in terms of the big picture from beginning to end, and what your involvement in that, making it happen, and what impact it will have upon others.